today we would discuss the basics of most common ways of organization of remote procedure call services, as we call it. So we will discuss two techniques today. It is JSON-RPC and SOAP web services. So as we discussed on our previous lecture, we have four ways to organize the web services APIs, and we would start with working with RPC API today. And today we would cover two main approaches to organization of RPC API. The first approach is non-XML or not SOAP web services. It is a whole range of different techniques to organize remote procedure calls using the HTTP protocol, and these ways are based on the different methods of interaction using such such protocols as JSON, RPC, or any other standards for organization of I'm sorry, I have some technical issues right now. So yes, non-XML web services approaches that we would discuss today, they have a variety of different protocols that work with these this category, and within these protocols, we would discuss the JSON-RPC protocol that is based on the JSON format, as you may understand. The second way to organization of the XML web services, it is SOAP web services set of standards, and we would also discuss them today. It is the most common approach that uses web services description language to organize the description of the web service, the interface, and it uses SOAP technology to organize the connection between the services, the interaction between the services. So we would cover these type of protocols also today. So let's start with the JSON-RPC. The JSON-RPC, it is one of the simplest way to organize the JSON, to organize the remote procedure call communication using the JSON protocol. JSON, as you remember, it is JavaScript object notation protocol, and this protocol is based on this description of the objects in the JavaScript language. So when we discuss this protocol, you should consider that this protocol uses the JSON as the basics of the communication. And all the procedures, all the methods, they are passed as the JSON annotation in the objects. All the parameters are passed as an array of JSON objects. And as you understand, this protocol is based on JSON. The JSON-RPC works by sending requests to the server that implements the protocol, and the client is usually the program that you want to invoke a method on a remote system. All transmitted data as simple objects serialized as JSON. So JSON-RPC is based on the two ways communication method. So you send your data, the server receives the data, and he sends the data back. So this communication pattern has the name as request response pattern. So you can see here this JSON-RPC request response pattern. The request in the JSON-RPC protocol, it should contain three essential properties. First property, it is method. Method, it is a string with the name of the called method. It is just the name of the method that you need to call. Second, params. It is an array of objects to be transmitted to the method as parameters. And the third one, it is ID, identifier. It is the a value of any type which is used to set the correspondence between the request and response. So this ID parameter, it is just some identifier. It can be a string or it can be some number, for example, 1, 2, 3. This number is used by the client and the server to understand that the client sends the message with the identifier 1, 2, 3, and the server sends you a response to this exact message, with the identifier 1, 2, 3, to understand that the response was on this specific request. Response of this request should contain the following properties. Result, it is the data that is returned by a method. If a error occurs during a method, this method that we asked to implement on the server, if error occurs during the execution of the method, this property must be set to null. So you just send null as a result. Second part, it is error. The error code we should send here, error code is error occurs during the execution of a method. If there is no errors occurred during the execution of some method, we should pass null here as the result. And the third one, it is ID. So the ID should be the same value as the ID that we sent to the server. That is how our client would understand that the server send the result of the execution to the message that we sent using this ID. So as you can see, this is very, very simple way for organization of transmission. It is just a set of standard objects, JSON objects that are sent to the server and back. And these JSON objects are just simple text, because JSON is a text-based protocol. So JSON-RPC works using the exchange of text messages format as JSON. So let's take a look on the JSON-RPC example, how it works. So here we can see the example of the JSON-RPC communication. When we see this type of arrow, that means that we, as a client, send the data to the server. So here on the first row of this example, we see that our client send some message to the server. And because the message is in the format of the JSON object, it starts with this bracket and it ends with this bracket. Okay. So what our client want our server to do? Right now, our client want to invoke the method with the name postMessage. This is the name in the method field of this request. Okay, so the server now understands that our client want to post some message. So what message our client want to post? The parameters of this method are sent in the params field. So we see here that this is an array with one element inside this array. And this one element is a string that with the capture hello all. So now we understand that our client want to execute the method on the server post message, just a second, post message, and with one parameter, string. We have the name of this method here, and we have the value of this parameter here. So right now, when the server sees this string as incoming string to the JSON-RPC, he understands that our client wants to invoke the post message method, and he sends here one parameter, string A. And as a value of the string, he sends hello all. That's good. So the server sends this, the server see this parameter, see this incoming string. What is he doing afterwards? He sends the result of the implementation of this string, of this method. The result, so he returns 1. That means that this, I think this method had the return parameter of integer. So we could think about how it can be interpreted, but it is possible that the method would return 1 if the message was successfully posted. So we get a result 1, and we would understand that our message was successfully posted. The error would be set to null. That's great. That means that no errors occurred during the processing of our message. And we see here this identifier, this ID 99. So this ID 99 is the same ID with the message that we sent. So now we understand that the server returns the value 1 of this result to the exact our message, to this message. He sends us back this result. So we can see here this request response pattern. When we send the request to the server and we highlight this identifier 99, and the server sends us back this result, and he also highlights that this is the result for the message with the identifier 99. But also, we can see here that the server simultaneously can send us some additional information that we can process. So using the information that we have here, that we send some messages to the server and the server sends some messages to us, we can make a conclusion that this is some kind of implementation of chat. So this is a chat, and our client can send some text message to the server, and the server would spread this message to all other clients that are connected to the server. To send this message, the client uses the method post message. And the server, to send the message to all the other users, uses the method handle message. Handle message. Handle message. So the users would be able to read this message that the other user sent. Okay, so now we see that our chat is working like this, using these examples of the protocols exchange. First was the post message that we sent our message. Next, the server sends us handle message request and parameters. Now we can see that in this example we have two parameters. One parameter, the parameter number 1, it is the name of the user who sent the message, and the server sends us this name as a string. And the second parameter, it is the value of the message that the user sent us. So for example, we can see that we can read two messages right now. The first message, user1 sent OK message. And the second one, we also need to handle that the user3 sent us, not us, but everyone, the message gotta go. So we can see here the process of exchange of information between two elements of our client-server architecture. Our client sends the messages what he wants to other users to see, post message, and the server can process this message and send these messages to all the other users using the handle message request. This is very simple protocol to implement, and there are a lot, more than 100 libraries for all the most common languages to organize this communication using the using the JSON-RPC protocol. So the JSON-RPC protocol is implemented using, of course, using JavaScript, using Java, using C#. You can see, I don't ask you to memorize all these languages and platforms that the JSON-RPC was implemented, but you can see here that it is a lot of different approaches. So before we process to our next part of the lecture, I would ask you to pass the small test on the JSON-RPC protocol. Okay, the time of the test is finished. And we need to discuss the results because right now the results are not very good. So what we can see in our test here, just a second, I need to go and to show this type of window. This is display number 2, transition, yeah. So let's discuss what we can see in this example. And in this example, we can see that the question was the following. The server provides the following interface. We have the parameters of the method, the return value of the method. It does get date time. We have the name of the method, get time. And we have one input parameter of the method, string time zone. And we want to invoke the method using the JSON-RPC. So, okay, we can take a look about how the JSON-RPC message is composed. And if we take a look on about how the message is composed, we see that the message have three main parts: method, params, and ID. So the question asks us to provide a definition of JSON message that the client should send to the service to get the current time. So first element of the message should be the field method. Let's copy this as example, and we put it here as a template. This is the template of our return of our message that our server should receive. Okay, so what we see here, what is the name of the method that we want to invoke? Please answer me in the chat of this stream. What is the name of the method that we want to invoke on the remote server? That's right. The name of the method is getTime. So after the keyword method, we post the name of our method that we want to invoke on the remote server, getTime. Great. Now the server would understand that we want to invoke the method getTime. But what parameters we want to send to this method if you want to invoke this method and to understand what is the time in our current time zone? What should I type here? Anyone in the chat, please provide me with the possible answer. What should I type here in the field params? Yes, right. You're right. Thank you very much, Karar. We pass our value GMT plus 5 because we want to get our time in the GMT plus 5 time zone, and the server knows that this method has only one parameter, and it would pass this GMT plus 5 exactly in this parameter time zone. Okay, so we have method, we have params. So what ID should we use? Any suggestions? Can we use 99 here? We can use anything here. If we go here to the description of what ID, the value of any type which is used to set the correspondence between the request and response. So in the ID, we can use anything. We can use 99, we can use 1, we can use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can use anything we want. So then when the server would give us a response on this message, so the server would give us the result. It is 12:15 p.m. or a.m., for example. Error, null, ID, So here, what identifier we would pass to the server should return the same identifier of the ID in the result message. And that is the only purpose of this ID. So here we can paste anything we want, including 99, because whatever. So this is one of the possible correct answers to the test that you just tried. Method, getTime, params, GMT plus 5, and ID, you can pass anything in this ID. So the next part of the lecture, it is XML Web Services. So JSON-RPC, as you should understand, it is based on the JSON protocol. And in this test, we just discussed how the JSON message is formulated to organize the communication between the client and the server. But this protocol is very, very simple. You can see that the message format is very simple. We have very few elements that describe the process of the communication. We have no specified methods to identify the interface of the remote server. We just need to understand, and we need to know somehow that the remote server provides these and these methods and these elements. So this is very, very simple protocol. And this protocol was not suited enough to fulfill the requirements of big enterprise systems. And big enterprise systems wanted a lot of standards and a lot of formal methods of identification of interfaces and communication between the services. So that is where the XML web services started to occur. They were defined in the beginning of the 2000s, and of the consortium of big software companies that worked in the field of internet computing, including the Microsoft Corporation. They defined the set of standards and the set of rules that was the basics of the XML web services. So as you can see from the name, XML Web Services, it is XML-based platform, XML-based platform-independent technology that supports distributed computing. They are using such protocols as HTTP, XML, XSD, SOAP, and WSDL, to define the interfaces of the services and define the process of communication between the services. So what is the basic protocols? First, this is WSDL, Web Service Definition Language. It is a standard XML document describing the fundamental properties of each of the web services, such as what is the web service, what methods it provides, how do I access this web service, including data formats and protocols of communication, and where the web service is located, network address or URI, Unified Resource Identifier of this web service. This information is all stored in the standard way in the WSDL document that describes the XML web service. Second, SOAP. In the very beginning, SOAP was an abbreviation for a simple object access protocol. But today, they do not abbreviate this. It is just a SOAP. It is a protocol based on exchange of XML documents. So if some client want to invoke some method on the remote server, first he need to create an XML document, and inside this XML document he need to specify in the standard way what method he want to invoke and what parameters he want to pass to this method. This is an XML document. As you remember, JSON-RPC, we wanted this to be a JSON document, but SOAP describes this as an XML document. And this XML document is sent to the remote server as a message, and the remote server translates this XML document to something that he can understand and execute. So SOAP defines this process of creation of this XML document and the transition over the HTTP protocol to organize the communication. Also, the one thing that is commonly was used in the systems that were using XML web services, it is a UDDI system or UDDI service. The UDDI, it is a register of the all web services that are available in the company or available for the usage of external parties. So when web service provider creates some web service, it publishes this web service to this register. And using this WSDL, we can understand how to access this web service that was created. So consumer of the web service can search for this exact WSDL or this exact web service in the UDDI, receive the information how to create the proxy for this remote web service, and organize the communication between the consumer and the provider using the SOAP protocol. So how the web services, XML web services, are addressed. The web service address is a standard Uniform Resource Identifier, or URI. Here we can see an example of the Uniform Resource Identifier, and using these we can address a remote service. So here in this URI we see the following parts. First, it is HTTP. That means that our web service is accessible using the HTTP protocol. Second part, it is the name of the website where this web service is located. And after the website, we see the path to the exact path to the web service that we want to invoke using, and especially to this place, we would send our SOAP messages to invoke the execution of the remote methods of this web service. So what you can use to create web services today, there are a lot of different web servers that support creation and hosting of the web services. Microsoft.NET using Windows Communication Foundation, IBM servers, Java, a lot of different Java servers, including, of course, Enterprise Edition. It is some old school Java, but you can use Apache Tomcat, for example, in Java to host the XML web servers. So let's go to the description of the WSDL format and the WSDL standard. So what are the elements of the WSDL document? So as you remember, the WSDL document, it is a description of the web server. So on our previous lecture, we described that our web service, do you remember this? Our web service, we have the URI where our web service is located. We have the description of the methods that our web server provides. And each method, we have a description of the format of incoming messages that we need to send to invoke the execution of this procedure. This is procedure, and this is procedure. And the out output message that would be created when the remote procedure would be invoked. So these are the parts that are defined by our WSDL document. Messages that we need to send to get the execution of the remote procedure and to get the result from the remote procedure. The names of the remote procedures, the URI of the remote server and the service, and the protocol how to organize this message delivery to the remote server. So knowing this, let's go and take a look on the main parts of the WSDL document. Service, it is a named collection of the endpoints or ports. That means that the service provides a set of remote procedures that we can invoke. Port, it is the address or connection point to the web service. Port type, oh, by the way, I was wrong. These are the methods. Port types are the methods provided by the web service. Binding, it is a communication protocol that we use to establish connection to the web service. Types, they are data types that are used by the web service. And the message are the messages that we use to connect to our web service and to get results from our web service. These are the key elements of the WSDL document, and they describe how to work with our remote web service. So let's go and understand how can we use these elements to describe our web service. As an example, we would use a simple web service that was written in Java, and this is a calculator web service. This calculator would be able to execute only one remote procedure. This is the name of this remote procedure, sum. So this calculator can sum A and B and provide us with the result. You can see that this is very complicated calculator. So to make Java understand that this is a web server, a web service, and this is a web method, we use this annotation in Java to describe that this is the web method, and this would be exposed to the remote procedure call service. So to start our web service, we would publish the information of our endpoint, and our calculator would be available on this URI, localhost port 9000 Acme calculator. Okay, good. So we have one web service and we have one web method in this web service that would be able to create a sum of A and B. So let's take a look about how the interface of this method is defined by the WSDL document. I need to highlight that this WSDL document would be created automatically by your integrated development environment, by your IDE that you use if you would create a project with the type of web service or XML web service. You should not write these WSDL documents by your hands. They are generated automatically. So this would be created as the WSDL of this calculator. The first part of this WSDL document, this is namespaces part. So these namespaces would be description of the basic standards that would be used to work with this web service. And in these web namespaces, we can see that somewhere in the document we would use SOAP. Somewhere in the document we would use the WSDL notation, and so on and so on. And the first string would describe that this is not the only document, the WSDL document that would describe our web server. We would use the port types, especially the information of the methods of our web service from the document Acme calculator port type dot WSDL. You can see here that this document named Acme calculator, and this document was created especially to describe the port types. It is possible in the XML documents to import other XML documents, so the documents that we are editing would not be very, very big. They would separate it by different documents. Okay, the first type, the first element of the WSDL document, it is binding. The binding element describes how our server would be accessed. What are the main transport protocols would be used to access our web service. And in this binding element, we can see that we would use the SOAP via the HTTP transport. It is the most common way to access the XML web services using the SOAP over HTTP. Of course, there are possibilities to use different protocols, but we would focus today on this way of communication. Next, we would describe the service, where the service is located. And in this part, we can see that this is the service Acme calculator. And on the Acme calculator, we have one port, and this port is accessed by the following URI: localhost services example Acme calculator. We create this service, and this service would be available using this URI. Also here, I forgot in the binding, we describe the operation part. The operation part describes that our service would have one operation with the name sum, and we would have one input and one output elements of this operation. But specifically, what would be the parameters of this operation, we would see in this document that we would cover next. So, port type. In the port type, we see that our message, that our first operation, sum, would have two messages. This is the input message that our service would receive, and this is the output message that our service would send as the result of the execution of the operation sum. So this is input and this is output. Next, we see that this is our port type calculator, and we have one operation, and the input described as this message, and the output is described as this message. And we need to go to the third document, port type schema XSD, to understand what is the parameters of the messages that we would need to send to these elements to invoke the remote execution. So this is the schema XSD document. In this document, we see that the message with the name sum, we remember this is the message that we would receive, should have two parameters. We remember from the description of the method that it is integer sum int a, int b. And here we can see that in these integers we put the first argument and the second argument. So our input message would have two integers, arg0 and integer arg1. And we would put them into our incoming message. Here are the names. And this sum would have one response message that would have one argument, integer. So we can see that this is the elements of our response message. We have only one element. It is integer because we can see this is the integer, and the name is return. So when we create the result of our addition of A and B, we would put them into the output message and we would send them to the client that requested the execution of the remote method on our server. So you already can see that this WSDL description, it is very verbose and very complicated. We had, let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of the description of our remote method. Okay, 5 plus 5. We had 10 lines of the description of our remote method using Java. Okay, with all the annotation, it could be 15. And these 15 lines, they generated these huge files, more than 60 lines generated XML code to describe this 50 lines of Java web service definition. You can see that this document is especially not suited to be created by the developer. It is specifically created automatically by the means of integrated developer environment. So let's go to a more precise description of the elements of the WSDL element. First, it is a port type element. It is one of the most important elements in the WSDL, and it defines the web service itself, its operation, and its messages. It can be compared to the library of functions where all the input parameters and the results of the functions are defined. And this is more precise definition of the port type block of our Acme calculator web service. And in this block, we can see that we define our operation sum, and we define that this operation sum has input message, some request, and output message, some response. And this input message, some request, would be held by the standard name TNS sum, and the output message would be defined by the message sum response. Second, the message element defines the data elements of the operation. Each message can contain one or more parts, and the parts of the message are just the variables of our remote procedure that we need to pass. So this remote procedure would provide the execution of this remote, that we can invoke the execution of this remote procedure. These parts can be compared to the parameters of the called functions in traditional programming languages. And here we see that the message sum, that is input message, has parameters TNS sum, and the message sum response, this is the output message, would have parameters sum response. Binding element defines the message format and protocol details for each port. We already defined that inside the binding element we have the port type block that defines the information about the format interaction protocols, and most commonly we would use SOAP as the method of the communication. We can see it here. Port and service blocks. These blocks determine where the service is located. Port describes the location and the access of the endpoint, and service, it is a named connection of ports. So we have one service in our example, we have one port in our example, and this service and this port, they are located on this URI. So when our client would like to create an application for us, or we as a client of this web service would like to create an application, all we need to do is to get this web service WSDL description. WSDL description. We then can convert this WSDL description automatically to the proxy component in our application. The proxy component is a special component that you remember from the RPC lecture that substitutes and have the same interface as the remote procedure. It has the same names, the same parameters, the same return values as the remote procedure. And the client can invoke the proxy class or the proxy component, but instead of execution of this remote procedure on the machine of the client, the proxy creates automatically the request and sends this request to the remote service. The remote service analyzes this request and sends the response to this request back to the proxy, and then the proxy would give the results of this request to the client. So that is how the remote procedure call is implemented using the XML Web Services. The WSDL document, it is the only document that is necessary to create this proxy, because in this document we defined everything. We defined where this service is located. We defined all the interface parameters. What are the names of the remote procedures? What are the names of the remote parameters that you need to invoke? What are the types of the remote parameters that you should use to call the remote procedure? So here we can see that the client can be generated automatically by the same mechanisms that you used to create the WSDL document. So there are specific parsers that you can give the address of the WSDL document. They read this document and they create us this interface for our remote procedure. And here you can see the example of this interface, and this interface provides the possibility to the client to invoke. So we create new service, we create new instance of our calculator, and we call this method sum the same way as we call the local method on our local machine. But instead of execution of this method on our machine, our client would instead go to the remote server, pass the parameters, and get back with the results that would be passed as the results of the invocation of this remote procedure. So in this lecture, we discussed the basics of the two web services approaches. First is JSON-RPC, and the second is XML Web Services. And especially in the XML Web Services, we discussed the WSDL format to describe the interface of the remote web service. On our next lecture, we would focus on the SOAP standard of the interaction between the elements of the remote web server and the client of the XML Web Service infrastructure. Thank you very much, and we would see each other in a week.